Hello and welcome to Inky Finger Stampin'. Today I'm going to show you how I made this card, or more specifically how I made this background for this card. It uses a basic ink smooshing technique with a little bit of a twist. The stamp set that I'm using is this new Sea of Textures, and it's coordinating die set under the sea. This will be available June 1st. In the new annual catalog. So basic ink smooshing is where you put ink down on a slick surface, spritz it with water, and dip your card in it to get a mottled background. Kind of similar to this. I wanted to do it with slightly bit of a twist. I've been kind of interested with the Distress inks oxide version that are out now on the market, and wondered how I could get a similar effect using Stampin' Up! Colors. So if you know anything about the Distress oxide inks, they talk an awful lot about how they're a combination of pigment ink and dye ink, which allows it to sit on the surface instead of soaking into the paper, letting the colors show through with layer upon layer. So I thought, well, maybe I could do that with the supplies we have from Stampin' Up! So I took the reinker, the Craft White reinker, along with the dye reinkers, and mixed them together to form my own version of an oxide ink. The card that I made uses 3 ink colors of Pool Party, Bermuda Bay, and Tranquil Tide. So I made up my own little Distress Oxide inks using the Craft White and the dye inks. So I used these little paint trays, and here in this one you can see I've already put some of the craft ink inside that one. And then just taking the dye ink refills and adding color. There's a lot of play with this. You'll have to figure out how much of the ink to use. I found the lighter the color, the more drops of reinker I needed, because you are mixing it with white and lightening the color slightly. The darker the ink, the less of the reinker drops I needed. So for this light Pool Party one, I did 3-4 drops for that size of a little pool of craft ink, and then just mixed it together. I just have a toothpick here. Now it looks really dark, but the more you mix it, the lighter it gets, until it almost seems there's no color to it at all. But you want to mix this up and mix this up very well. You can see that as the more I mix, the more it is lightening in color. Okay, so over here I have some finished already. You can see here's my Pool Party, my Bermuda Bay, and my Tranquil Tide. This looks very light, but it's a dark color, so it really takes over the surface of your card as you are making it. I used a paintbrush, slightly damp paintbrush, to pick up some of the ink and add it to some sort of craft mat. This is just a silicone baking sheet. You could use a plastic placemat or whatever that you might have. Just using the damp paintbrush to pick up the 3 colors that I wanted in my project. And then spray the area with water so that they are pooled into little piles like that. So this is your typical ink smooshing, just adding craft ink to it. And so here is my white paper. Now you cannot use Whisper White. I even tried it with our thick Whisper White, and it does not work either, but the shimmer white works beautifully with this project. So I kind of preferred to go one color at a time as I dipped it in, moving it around from section to section until I got the saturation that I wanted. You'll kind of notice the colors fade and separate a bit, and then you can almost see the darker dye color mixed in there. Now this is a very messy project. You will have inky fingers when you're done. If you don't, you're doing something wrong. Just keep picking up your colors. I may have spritzed a bit too much water, but that's fine. Between each layer, you'll go and dry off your paper and either add more color to your sheet or keep picking up the color that's already there. The more that you add to each layer, the more intricate that it looks. Some of my finished papers look like this. They're all different. Every single one is completely different. And then because they're on that shimmer white, you get a fun little shimmer look. So I went back, dried it, dipped it back in time and time again until I got the coverage that I liked with the little watermarks all over it. Each one's completely different. Now, because these papers have that both craft and dye, you can still do a lot of the same things that you do with, that they advertise you can do with the Distress Oxide and their regular Distress inks as well. So once it's completely dry with all the layers that you want, take a water bottle, spritz little droplets of water on top of your paper, let it set, and after a moment you can pick it up with a paper towel and you will have removed some of the ink underneath it. You can do this exact same process with ink smooshing with our inks as well. So here you can kind of see the mottled effect you get by having the dye ink. It's got that nice chalky finish where the color sits on top and adds layer upon layer. You can see all the different layers of color. It gives a very fun ocean background. To finish off my project, I used die cuts from the Under the Sea framelits, this fun netting background. I added in pieces of the seaweed and coral from the same die set. Just kind of placing them around until I got a layout I liked. Some in front and some in back. I also added in some of the gold metallic thread, a large and small sand dollar, and then I did emboss the octopus on vellum cardstock with white embossing powder, and on the back where his tentacles have openings and show through, I used the light and dark Bermuda Bay Stampin' Blends, and you can see through his legs then the color that coordinates with the background. And then added a sentiment and finished off my card this way. It's a wonderful card. It's a very easy background, and the mess you make on your craft mat you can make 3 or 4 cards out of before you add more ink and move on from there. Just another tip, what do you do with the rest of this ink that's left here? Well, you can also sponge it and get a very similar effect on your shimmer white cardstock, just like you've seen them do with the Distress Oxides. So using little sponge daubers, I can pick up any of that leftover ink, and it ink blends beautifully because it's got that pigment mixed in with it. And you can go with each color and get a very nice blend between them as you cover a piece of paper. So you could definitely do a similar type background, just sponging with this ink that has the craft ink mixed in with it, and still spritz it with water and get an interesting background as well. Using any of your leftover ink, these blend quite nicely together, better than I could do if I was just using the dye ink. And here is a finished sample of the three colors blended together and then spritzed with water to give a very interesting underwater background effect. And this would look gorgeous as well behind those same elements. So I hope this gives you a new way to use your re-inkers and a bit of an upsell to help your customers see that just because it's on the market, we can replicate that a lot with our exact same products that we have in the catalog. Thanks. See you later.